Good evening once again to the Marty Heiser Show. You know what? Every week we come with some fresh programming. We're cutting edge. You know, I can tell we're cutting edge. We're right here. The Rangers are tied 1-1 with the New Jersey Devils in the semifinals in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, and they're doing very well. As a matter of fact, I put together some pictures of just how they're doing. Blue Storm Rising. Boom, right there. If you never watched Stanley Cup playoff hockey, I'm telling you it's something to see. Those guys lose about 10% of their body weight, just grueling through. They end up looking like POWs at the end, bearded but happy because their name goes on the Stanley Cup. It's something to see. If you haven't watched it, Tuesday afternoon, that's going to be the third game in the Stanley Cup semifinals between the New York Rangers and the New Jersey Devils. And on the other coast, we have the LA Kings playing the Phoenix Coyotes, and the LA Kings are slapping them. So we could potentially have, dare I say, Hollywood versus Broadway in a Stanley Cup final. Now, I don't know if you like this kind of stuff, but to me, that would be good television. And with the onset of TiVo, you can TiVo these games, and as long as you don't find out what the score is, you can watch them at night and still watch the Marty Heiser Show, where
you always get the truth.
You always get the truth, or the warped perspective of the truth from me and some of my select friends. And speaking of select friends, tonight, we are honored. I'm telling you, right here in this studio, this show is getting taken seriously of late. At least the politicians think it's serious. We've had Linda McMahon has been on. Mayor Boughton has been on because Al Robinson of Hat City Blog was not anywhere within. It's almost like a restraining order when the mayor comes. Al Robinson can't be here. It's a whole thing. Go to Hat City Blog, you'll understand. No one wants to see a big-headed photo like that. But Mayor Boughton has been on. Linda McMahon has been on. Chris Shays has been on. We've had some luminaries on here, and you know why? Because it's a political season. Tomorrow is the Republican Party. Yes, contrary to popular belief. What's that? Yes, it's true. The Republican Party still exists in the Nutmeg State. They are holding on by their fingernails. And one of the champions of the Republican Party in the state of Connecticut is Toni Boucher. Pound for pound, inch for inch, the go-getter, energizer bunny of Republican politics. She will be here right in this studio to talk about the state of Connecticut and where we rank in regards to it. She had some incredible things. I don't want to steal her thunder, but just some incredible things she said about how business-friendly or unfriendly the state of Connecticut is, how she just got back from Texas. I shouldn't tell you all this stuff, but it's so good. Texas just added 4 congressional districts. You know why? Because it's a right-to-work state, because they don't have state income tax, because they're saying, hey, guess what? We like capitalism. We think it's a good thing. Come on in here. They're not trying to tear down the wage payer in hopes of lifting up the wage earner. They're saying, welcome to Texas. We're open for business. Y'all come, you see? And they're not run by unions much like this state is. So she's going to talk a little bit about her time down in Texas. She was newly nominated for the 26th Connecticut State District, for the Connecticut State Senate District. The Democrats are putting up someone, but if I was a betting man, and I'm not, but if I was, I'd put my money on State Senator Toni Boucher, which as we speak, she is getting a police escort to this studio, and she will be with us shortly. But in the meantime, since Toni isn't here yet, I got my dopey friend, Dave Straight, who's always full of conspiracy theories. I know he saw the Drudge Report where President Obama said he was born in Kenya. Self-description, people. It's almost like he's taunting us with this. He comes out and he has born in the USA. Who's that guy, that New Jersey artist? Bruce Springsteen. He comes out with that song when he goes to talk. And yet you can look at it, it says, born in Kenya, raised in Hawaii, and first black editor of the Harvard Law Review. Anyways, you have some thoughts about the economy,
Well, let me start off by saying this. What does Huckabee, O'Reilly, Hannity, and Levin all have in common?
They're all right-wing wackos on Fox?
No, they all want to be Marty Heiser, man. Seriously.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're doing a fantastic job of keeping politicians' feet to the fire. I mean, you're a force to be reckoned with in Connecticut at this point.
Absolutely. I'm a legend in my own mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people are calling me to get on your show.
I think so. We're just a smidge above Wayne's World. We're this far from being in our grandmother's basement, but doggone it, they give us the airtime free. So
well, Mike Myers will be on next week, and maybe we'll complete the circle with Wayne's World.
Okay. Sounds good.
Well, anyway, one of the topics is everybody's talking about Facebook. Everybody you talk to has a connection somehow with Facebook.
Yes.
So they went public tonight. And they start trading in the morning. Well, they start trading in the morning, but they announced the price that they went public at. $38 a share. Is that a good buy or a bad buy?
You know, I'm a little leery on the whole Facebook thing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, they got these millions and millions, hundreds and millions of people, and they click, yes, I like this, or no, I don't like this. So let's say you like lawn sprinklers. Then all of a sudden, the guys that make lawn sprinklers can go, hey, Facebook, give me the 10,000 people that like lawn sprinklers, and then they send lawn sprinkler coupons to those people, and then they buy lawn sprinklers. And this is somehow worth $104 billion. Is that basically it?
Well, yeah, that's basically a side note relative to our budget deficit at this point. But yeah, $104 billion is still real money. That's a big number.
It's a big number.
So let's put this in perspective for just a second. $104 billion, that's 26 times revenues. That's 105 times earnings. So you take Google, for example. Google's valued at about around 210 billion, and they have $40 billion in revenues. Here's a company with $4 billion in revenues being valued at 109.
Wow. Okay.
So how does that make sense? And if you look at the metrics that are valuing, that people are looking at in this company, I don't even think people look at it, but they're generally declining. So the growth in Facebook participants is declining. The amount of time people are spending on their Facebook account is declining. You could have a fad company here. That's $110 billion.
So $38 a share, you're saying short the stock.
I'm not.
I got all the lingo
saying,
down.
I don't know how the heck you can buy that stock.
So you short it and you make money that way.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of hard to short in the first 6 months. Generally, companies, you can't short IPO companies in the first 6 months. Some you can, but most of them you can't. Okay. Now, lo and behold, guess who makes $1 billion off of that? Goldman Sachs. One of the co-founders.
Zucker makes $14 billion. Or something like that.
And one of the co-founders of Facebook defriended America, gave up his citizenship, and claimed a Singapore citizenship.
Hey, he's no joke. All the rich people out of France are bailing just as quick as they can. They're getting in the Channel and heading to Great Britain, or they're abandoning ship as quick as they can because they see the socialists that have taken over there. And they're going after the rich people.
Yeah. So one of the classics, switching gears. There's not much more to talk about on Facebook, but. So you mentioned about people fleeing France. Next topic, what's going on in Europe?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know that might be. What are those questions where you ask?
Rhetorical?
Thank you. Good ACT word. Rhetorical question, because I know you have something to say.
Okay?
I won't. But by the way, if you we'll put up the phone number. It's 438-2003. If you have a question for this brain trust here, please chime in. If you think we're idiots and we should get kicked off the air, please call in. We want to hear from you. 438-2003. Larry Ditkoff, if you're out there, we want to hear from you. We want you right here. And certainly call in when Toni Boucher is on, because she's a serious person to be reckoned with. But what's going on in Europe is the following. You've got Merkel in Germany, and the Germans hold on to the money.
Break out in German here. You got German in you.
Ja, die Deutsche hat alles die Geld in die ganze Europa und gibt kein Geld zu the crazy Greeks and the Spanier und so weiter, because no, all they do is drink the wine and they don't Arbeit, because Arbeit macht frei. But, bad reference. But no, all kidding aside, the Germans have all the money because they have savings rate and they're industrious and that's all they know to do. There's no sense of humor over there. They're Arbeit, work. And now the rest of the Eurozone, which at the time seemed like such a good idea, is just falling by the wayside. Spain is in big trouble. Ireland's in big trouble, but Greece, of course, is a poster child for, just not doing any good. Now, politically, or France is not doing that good either. So they're saying, well, if you want us to fork over this money, you guys have to have austerity programs. You need to cut your spending, cut all this entitlements, and you need to get your house in order. And what do these democracies do? They promptly vote out the government that agreed to that and vote in the extreme left wing. I mean, we're talking hammer and sickle communists, and the extreme right wing, we're talking neo-Nazis, and they're going to start to put together some sort of a partnership, and that's going to be progress. Is that basically it?
Well, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. So you've got dominoes lined up over there. So Greece is about 2% of the Eurozone. So basically Greece always has financial problems. And they have a history of rolling over on debt and struggling. And I think I mentioned to you before that hairdressers can retire at age 50 over there because it's a hazardous job.
Yeah, okay.
So, so if Greece is the only one that defaults, well, France is on the hook to them in a big way. So let me preface these comments that don't think I'm an authority on this. I'm just parroting what I hear. And the fact is, nobody really knows what's going on. Nobody understands the magnitude of it. But let's assume for a second that Greece defaults. Well, suddenly France is on the hook to Greece. Right. And guess who's on the hook to France? Germany. So what's happening right now, one of the famous scenes in that movie Men in Black is when they're all in that room and there's a countdown, there's 60 seconds left, and all the aliens are fleeing the planet Earth.
Right.
That's what's happening right now in Greece, Spain, Ireland, Italy, and Portugal.
France, isn't it too?
Well, France is, I didn't see the credit spreads on France today, but you have this flight of capital where people are just taking all their money out of all the banks in Spain. They're taking all the money out of banks in Greece, and they're buying German bunds with it, or they're buying real estate in the UK.
So the rich get richer.
Well, kind of, but how does that end? So all of a sudden, ultimately, Germany is on the hook to everybody.
Right.
So then what happens? If you do get a domino effect, ultimately, Germany really, really feels a lot of pain, whether they write a check for anybody or not. Right. They're on the hook too.
But what Germany couldn't do twice in the last century, dominate and take over Europe militarily, they seem to be doing from a fiscal perspective now, because they're the only one in town, and the golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rules.
Right.
And so that's what they're doing, and there's a lot of people that are being dressed up like, in Hitler mustaches, and Merkel is being characterized as having a swastika on her arm, and it just seems like we're reliving the 1930s, 1940s all over again.
Right. So the really unfortunate thing in this whole situation is that the situation in the U.S. was actually, there were indications that it was starting to improve, the economy was starting to improve. So the housing market, I came from Chicago and I was working on a house there, and I had realtors, they could see that I was working on the house. I had realtors pulling up saying, are you going to sell this house?
Really?
I have buyers right now. There are actually bidding wars in Chicago. I read yesterday that bidding. I talked to a friend of mine in Houston. They sold their house in Houston in 2 hours. Now you can say, oh, they just had it too cheap. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But that's a good sign. There are bidding wars on high-end homes right now on the West Coast. Everywhere you look right now, well, not everywhere, but in about 30% of the housing market across the country, there are signs of improvement. That's a good thing.
Sure.
When you focus on the energy sector in the U.S., there are some really positive signs, very encouraging.
I think there's like 1% unemployment in North Dakota because just the energy sector is just exploding.
Right. It was hard to put the last dog to work. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, we are almost going to be joined by the most powerful Republican in the state of Connecticut, the newly nominated, once again, of course, from the 26th State Senate District in Connecticut, State Senator Toni Boucher.
Pleasure to see you here.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Hello. Welcome.
Straight.
So let me warn the listening audience, the viewing audience, that they better put on their seatbelt, because anytime Toni comes on this show,
we ready?
It's hard.
Steve.
It's hard to get Toni to open up. You really got to pull it out of her.
Buckle up and let's go.
Toni, I just want to say, by the way, the phone number here is 438-2003. If you have a question for your state senator, if there's something that's bugging you, if there's something that she's done well, by all means, now is the time. Call in. This is live television. There's the number again, 438-2003. But Toni, I had the privilege of going to your state Senate convention tonight. It was down in Wilton. And you were nominated, of course, it didn't seem like it was a nail biter for you, to run again. Thank you so much for running again. And in your nomination or acceptance speech, you talked a little bit about the economy in Connecticut as you compared it to Texas, where you were earlier this week.
I did. I had just come
tell
off
us,
a trip.
give us the bad news, but give us some hope, because we're going to open up a suicide hotline.
There is some hope. And yes, many people out there don't realize that we're a part-time citizen legislature.
Yes.
45% though, however, of the General Assembly are attorneys. I am not. I'm a businesswoman. I work in finance and investments, and I was, of course, had delayed any business trips until the end of session.
Right.
And so I was on a very whirlwind tour of Texas, both Dallas, Houston, and Austin. And I had to compliment the Texans for shoring up the U.S. economy, because they had created more jobs than any other state. They've gained 4 congressional seats because they added so many people and population. And of course,
people are actually moving, businesses are
they
moving.
are.
I heard that 40% of the new jobs created
That's
in the
right.
United States were created out of Texas.
That's right. In fact,
God
it's
bless
the
every
new
one of them.
it's the new Florida. In fact, it's less expensive than Florida. However, I have to tell you this. On my way home, as I drove through the wonderful roads in our beautiful communities, the enchanted forest is what some people would say, I recall my early days growing up in Connecticut, when Connecticut was the engine for growth, the #1 state for education, the #1 state for jobs and for innovation and products, the #1 state for so many things, because we were the low-cost state. Imagine that. No state income tax,
Right.
no inheritance tax. And now, not only do we have all those taxes, but they were increased at historic levels. And in addition, they were retroactive income taxes for individuals that didn't even expect them and didn't even know about them until halfway through the year. Of course, some of us proposed a totally alternative direction for our state
Right.
without those tax increases, and a very detailed plan, which was rejected out of hand, unfortunately, because right now we have a one-party system. However, because of those taxes, and because there are things that change, such as the death penalty, and so many other issues,
Right.
that the general public is waking up. And I see a definite trend that does have, I think, that one-party system on the defense this November. And I think I do see a change coming around the corner. I think people have recognized now that there is a different point of view. There are individuals with a different point of view.
Right.
We can't exist under one-party system. It never works well. We need some balance. The only way we can get some balance is for new individuals to be elected. And those of us that have had these alternative, I think, a better policy direction for us to go, need more numbers to be able to get our point across.
We had Dan was on it. The state representative Dan Carter was on the show, and he says when you're up there and you're in the minority, which the Republicans are, both obviously the governor and all the executive branch at the state level is all Democrat. The Senate, what are the numbers in the Senate? What's the
14 out of 36.
14 out of 36.
But we gained 2 seats,
Okay.
and the House gained 14 last November.
Really?
So we're on an upward trend in that regard.
But when-
And we did in the minority stop things. We stopped an additional increase in your gas tax. We stopped online gambling. We stopped the minimum wage law from being increased on businesses that are nearly going bankrupt or on the edge.
Right.
So we in the minority have been fairly effective, and quite honestly, I have worked very closely with the administration on education reform
Right.
and on improving the quality of education. So there are many things that we can agree on. We had Learn Here, Live Here proposal that the Republicans put out there that the administration has embraced. There are things in the jobs bill that was put out there that were many of the Republican ideas. We just need to do more of that. And we certainly don't need budgets that increase taxes and increase spending at 7%, while other states, Democratic states, are reducing their spending by 2%.
Right.
And let me tell you something. There's a better way to do the business of the state, and I think we are showing that way. We
Right.
just need more balance, and I think that just 2 more members of the Senate on our side of the aisle will make those budget discussions
You're
very
optimistic
different.
this could happen
I
this
do.
go-around?
I am very
Okay,
optimistic.
let me just, in round numbers, because I'm a big picture guy, but in round numbers, how much did taxes go up in Connecticut, and then how much did spending go up that gobbled up that incredible tax increase?
Well, I'll tell you, quite frankly, the reductions were only 20%, and so the balance of it was in taxes. We have a very, very unbalanced system. What was supposedly going to be the big salvation of our budget problems, big deficit, $1 billion worth of deficit, turned into a deficit of $200 to $300 million right as we speak. And the proposals to cut that deficit were, again, not the proposals that we would have put on the table. And in fact, we didn't need to go into more taxes. We needed to reduce the size of government and the level of spending in government. That is unsustainable. When you're in the worst recession in the history of the state of Connecticut, in the history of this country, you don't increase your spending by 7.2% in the last 2 years. Not when you have a Democratic state and Democratic governor of New York that reduced their spending by 2%.
Yeah.
So that is unsustainable.
Mayor Cuomo is laughing at us.
Well,
They're
absolutely.
going, "You bleeding hard tax and
And the
spend
governor
liberals
of
over there.
absolutely,
Cuomo, New York, laughing
absolutely,
at us.
absolutely. Even the New York Times had said, Connecticut's on a liberal joyride. Well, I think it's really the Daytona 500 right now. It's not just a ride; it's a speedway.
But if you suggest, even if you hint at, well, I think we need to withhold spending here, we need to curtail the requested increase, because everything always increases.
Sure.
If you even suggest, well, then you're against education, you don't want to protect seniors, you're against firefighter, policemen, teachers, and everything else. How politically, because people seem to be buying this stuff, both in Connecticut, at the local level, I know it's the same way in Richfield, and on the federal level.
Marty.
Yes.
Okay. We need,
walk me back from the edge here,
we
Toni.
need to reduce spending so that we could shore up the very pensions and livelihood of the individuals you're talking about.
I know, but
the state pension fund is in serious trouble. It's severely underfunded, less than 50%. It is not realizing the returns of 8% that they built into that. It's structurally unsound. That's happening on a national level and on a state level. And in order to be able to do that, we have to provide some changes in those level of benefits to the point where it is reasonable and where it makes sense structurally. So
I agree with you, but you are a politician. You're out there on the front lines every time. When you suggest this stuff, your opponent on the other side says you don't care about seniors and you're taking food out of the mouths of children.
Of course,
you run into this?
Of course we care about seniors.
I know you do, but how do you combat that politically?
Do you know which is the worst state in the country to retire in? Connecticut.
The
worst state to do business in, Connecticut. CL Magazine pronounced that. In fact, the Truth in Accounting Institute pronounced the 5 sunshine states and the 5 sinkhole states. We are the #1 sinkhole state.
Sinkhole doesn't sound good.
It does not sound
Sunshine
good.
sounds good. Sinkhole sounds bad.
It does. So when you are increasing property taxes because costs are going up so high, when you're taxing inheritance and you're taxing cars as property, you're taxing someone's pension, and you're increasing income taxes on any earnings that they have in the bank, or God forbid, should they realize anything on Wall Street from an investment standpoint on their retirement, it doesn't make financial sense for them to stay here. So you are actually hurting the very seniors you're talking about, and also the ability for government to provide them with some benefits.
I agree with you. I'm just saying politically it hurts. One last thing, Ridgefield is on sale. The town of Ridgefield lowered their taxes 1%. Yes, lowered it year over year, lowered it. They have a wonderful Board of Finance there in Ridgefield. Lowered their taxes. Come on in. Houses are going cheap. Ridgefield's for sale. #1 education.
Did you know that Ridgefield is the one town in my district that is growing in population?
Thank you.
The wealthiest.
Some nice people there.
I attribute it to the Board of Finance myself.
The wealthiest, which is New Canaan, is actually losing because they are the target audience for this increases in taxes, and they know that they had better get out of town if they want to preserve any of the things that they have over the years accumulated. And by the way, this isn't a bad thing. These individuals, most of them have worked their way up to a level where that they have some means, and they spread those means. I can't tell you the individuals that give millions of dollars to our hospitals, our community colleges. Our colleges are suffering from the fact that they are losing their donors, and they're losing them to non-tax states because then they can contribute more. They try to chase them to that state, like Florida, and they'll say to them, the foundation and individuals that are doing the fundraising, the development officers, are saying, well, we're down here in Florida now, we're in Nevada, we're in Texas, we're in North Carolina, Carolina, and we're deciding to give to the community that then we're now living in.
Go figure.
You know, it's really, it's structurally unsound. Even those high historic taxes did not produce the revenues that they were, and even this administration had anticipated that they would bring in.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why we're in deficit, because they didn't realize the revenues in taxes that they put in. They didn't realize the savings that they asked the employees to take some concessions, because those concessions weren't really that real. They weren't really that tough.
Yeah.
We still have some of the highest structural costs in benefits and salaries of government employees than the country. But sadly, we also have the highest tuitions in a lot of our community colleges and our state colleges, making that the reach and access to higher education more difficult for those with less means.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying this structure is hurting the very people they think that they're helping.
The phone number here is 438-2003, 438-2003. Don't hesitate to call in. You have Senator Toni Boucher on the line, and feel free to call in. Dave, where are we going wrong here?
Well, nowhere. So, Toni, one of the
Yes.
things I admire about you is that you take time to study what's going on in other states to see what works. So rather than just sitting here throwing stones, you propose solutions that seem viable. You know, I heard last week that the per capita debt in Illinois right now is $3,500 per person. Per capita debt right across the border in Indiana is $85 per person. You brought up a data point, I think it was
Mitch
last year.
Daniels, we're talking
fabulous.
about, the governor who has kept that state in the black for a long time. He anticipated things ahead of time, not waiting for a crisis to happen.
So you were on the show, I think,
Put on a
last
good
year at
Super
one
Bowl,
point, and you had a data point regarding the number of state employees per capita as a percentage of the population in Indiana versus Connecticut. Can you replay that number for us?
Well, I think that what we've seen is a lot of states that have a much larger population than Connecticut oftentimes have a third less of the numbers of employees. We, at our height, had anywhere between 50 and 57,000 employees for a population of 3.6 million. That's really unfortunate. You're right, I do travel around the country and my other job. I'm very interested in what happens in those other states. Oregon is an interesting state to compare Connecticut with. Although the land mass is huge, it actually has almost a similar population that Connecticut does. And I used to remark on the fact that they had about a quarter of the nursing home admittances than Connecticut does, meaning their costs then were much less than Connecticut. So even though their demographics were similar, and why was that? Why are we, putting individuals in nursing homes more? And that led to some of us really promoting the idea of providing healthcare services in home. In other words, money follows the patient into their home rather than putting them in an institutional setting. It's less expensive, it's a better quality of life. And we would like to follow that for sure. One of the negative things, though, that did happen this year, which was really a problem for me. I think we can save money when we allow nonprofits to do certain things that the state doesn't do well or is more costly, because their pay structure is so much higher. Their labor costs and benefits costs are astronomically higher. In fact, they're sometimes double, say, a hospital that's a nonprofit in Connecticut versus, say, Dempsey Hospital that's part of UConn, that's state employees. Structurally is vastly different. So when we're allowing home health care aides to provide care in the home, or daycare providing in the home for those that are indigent, their grandmothers are babysitting their grandchildren, Connecticut actually pays them in a Care for Kids program. We also have the disabled that have personal assistance in their home that help them if they're in a wheelchair and so on. All of those are being provided through a nonprofit structure. Right now, the state of Connecticut decided that they were going to allow them to unionize. Well, we fought that bill, we won. The governor, on the other hand, put in an executive order to do it anyway. And just this session, the one-party system that controls the House and Senate passed through a bill because it was challenged in court. Now they're going to be unionized. What does that do? It makes these private sector employees almost into state employee sectors for purposes of collective bargaining. What happens to the costs of that personal assistant in the home? Two things. One, what they get paid now, part of it has to be siphoned off to union dues. Secondarily, they're not responsive to the person that they're working for any longer. They're responsive to the union structure that has other priorities, not necessarily the priority, and it changes the relationship between those that are providing the services. Currently, the state sends the money to the individual that's disabled. They in turn pay their employee, so to speak. Now, that employee no longer works for the disabled person. They're working for the state, essentially, or the union.
And that's not optional, right?
It's not optional.
They have to be in the union.
Well, if they
no?
vote it in, and they've structured it so it's very easy to do, to unionize. And as a result, this is an area where, again, it's a business. Okay? If they're losing private sector union dues, public sector is now the area of growth.
Now, Scott Walker up in Wisconsin has been embattled here for the past couple of years, and that recall vote looks like it's going to go his way, and we hope it. I certainly hope it does. Is his approach potentially a model for what we could do in Connecticut?
Well, I think that there's a middle ground. There's a middle ground. Connecticut is so far on the extreme as a blue state.
Now, Wisconsin voted for Mondale, don't forget.
Well, that's true. Anything can happen. And certainly Connecticut has had varying times in its history. And as with everything,
Voted for Reagan.
A pendulum can swing. And maybe this is the year when that pendulum is swinging. And I do feel that there are many on the other side of the aisle that feel at risk.
Has the Tea Party been a positive effect in politics in Connecticut?
Well, to some degree, but not to the degree that it is maybe in other states. To some degree, I would say. I think that their original position of being really focused on financial issues, spending and debt and taxes, I think is a winning proposition. When they get involved into social issues, then they tend to lose some of that strength.
Do they though? I mean,
they do. Some of them do, some of them don't. But they are a very strong, important voice. The problem is once they tried to stay above the fray in the way of politics and not getting involved in as much in political races. Increasingly, that's maybe changing. That's yet to be seen. I think that their message is important and should be taken very seriously. I think discounting it is wrong. On the other hand, you have to listen to everyone. In my position, I have 7 towns. 4 of them, 2 of them are decidedly Democratic, 3 of them are Republican, and the other can swing either way. So essentially, this district can go in any direction. So I have to listen to everyone, and I do. I'm interested in everybody's point of view.
As far as the government unions, do you think there's an unholy alliance between elected officials and the government unions using taxpayer money? There's no exposure to the marketplace where there's checks and balances in place. Where if you ask too much, then you're just going to price yourself too high for the marketplace. It's just whatever the taxpayers are willing to pay, that's what you're going to get. And then the unions, government unions we're talking about here, vote in a solid monolithic block. And how do you combat that politically? I mean, isn't that the third rail of politics in Connecticut?
In Connecticut's unique in that regard. There are many blue states. A few of them, and Connecticut, of course, has been a blue state, but it has been a moderate state in most times. What has evolved over time is, you're right, everyone brings it's a part-time legislature, you bring your own private sector experience with you. And many lately have been, and in positions of leadership, have been literally, that's their private sector job, is union organizing and work in that area. So that's decidedly moved the state much more to the extreme side of that left side.
There is not one union member, it seems like, in the state of Connecticut that's going to vote for a Republican. Is that true, or did I
that's
just,
not true. It's not true. Just take, for example, the teaching environment and individuals that are members of a teachers union, but they are very individual, and you will find that many of them vote all over the place. And that's also true with private sector union members as well. You'll find many of them being extremely conservative, more conservative than you would think. I think that what you're talking about here is a very specific group, and that's a state employee union, which is different than unions that are in the private sector and so on. And I think the teachers unions, I think they're very independent thinkers. The vast majority of them. The spokespeople might make you feel differently about it, and if they own a position like what we have now, Speaker of the House, but then that's going to change now too, because that individual is moving on to run for Congress, and there'll be others taking their place, and some are retired. retiring. So the makeup of the individuals and what they bring to that position is important. For example, we have a doctor now that is in the House. He's a Republican doctor from Glastonbury. He's made a sea change in the decidedly trial lawyer environment that exists on both sides of the aisle, by the way, Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate. But this doctor being there has had a very strong voice and has given the doctors an opportunity to have a seat at the table and a voice. We have a dental hygienist. You wouldn't believe all the dental hygiene legislation that you would see. So they're bringing their point of view. I have been a small business owner and am in business now, so I try to bring the business voice. That profit is not a four-letter word, that in fact it creates jobs. And it is about the free market and being able to employ people. Profit equals jobs, because if you have profit, you can hire individuals.
I mean, you touched on something regarding legacy costs that have just piled and piled up in this state. So there are two things that really hit me on that. One is that in Connecticut, there are certain people that can retire at age 50, right? Police officers can retire at age 50. I can't think of another industry or private sector job in the country where you can retire at age 50. The other thing is that there are very, very few companies, large corporations, small, or anything in between, that have pension programs. You have to pay in,
401k, just like
programs.
I do. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So what do we do to change that in Connecticut? How do we get people working more? Why should they retire any earlier than I do?
It happens town by town, union by union. It's your municipal employee negotiations. It's your teacher negotiations, town by town. And then that spreads, that point of view, depending on structurally how things are tight. One really serious example is the city of Waterbury. The city of Waterbury had one election and one administration after another, both sides of the aisle, and before you know it, they had literally bargained contracts all the way into bankruptcy. An individual employee in the city of Waterbury, if they worked overtime, would get 2.5 times their salary. 2.5 times their hourly rate. Structurally, that was unsustainable. And as you mentioned, certain pension plans now are starting to go away. In other states they are. Connecticut's still hanging on. The fact that those defined benefit packages that guarantee you a certain rate of return and dollar amount at the end of your working years is no longer heard of in the private sector. Like you and I have a 401k. We invested, it can go up, it can go down, depending on what the market will do, how conservative or aggressive you are in your asset allocation for it, if you have control over that. And how much you put into it is up to you. Do you put 5% of your salary or 10% of your salary? Do you need more money for your kids going to college? Those are decisions that you make yourself. Whereas the other plans that are extremely expensive.
It's frustrating in Connecticut. I come from Chicago, and in Chicago, so you come out here and you can see obvious waste everywhere you look. One area that just drives me crazy is that in order to do anything on the roads or highways, you have to have police with a police car, lights flashing, armed policemen directing traffic.
Hold on.
Every state in the Midwest just has the construction company have a guy with a flag. It's about a third the cost. Why can't we do that in Connecticut?
You're not really concerned about the health and safety of the citizens,
There
are you?
aren't any more wrecks around construction sites there than there are here.
Do you have a question for State Senator Toni Boucher?
Yeah, I just heard her mention Waterbury, and I'm not going to even get into her stance on marijuana or even the more evil thing. She probably thinks that the fact that liquor sales are now available on Sunday. What do you think of Waterbury's mayor, who is a Republican? And Waterbury's had a checkered history with mayors. I believe they were in the last couple of years with prostitution assorted. What do you think of O'Leary taking that money after he reversed his decision?
Well, for one thing, we have a Democratic mayor. We have a Democratic mayor of Waterbury.
Listen.
We do have, there is a Democratic mayor in Waterbury now. In fact, Mayor Michael Jargura was a Democrat. He entertained the idea of becoming a Republican. He did not win re-election. So, when we talk about Waterbury, it is not really about political party. It's a process. It's a political process that really added to the structural cost of running a city. And most of it had to do with benefits, wages, salaries, pensions that became so generous that they literally broke the bank for the state.
But I think
and it
what
went
the call was talking about, sometimes Republicans, I can certainly fall into this, and can come across a little bit holier than thou and it's the dastardly other guys that were, fiscally out of control. I think he was referring to.
No,
I
I say Waterbury is both sides of the aisle.
Yeah,
they've had Republican mayors and then Democratic mayors and Republican mayors. This happened under all of their watches, not just one political party.
Yeah, and I guess that's what you're referring to. I know that there was a Republican. I believe he was the mayor at the time. Who had just a heinous situation.
He
with
was
a
terrible.
prostitute.
Oh, and there was one even before him that also was unsavory character as well. You're absolutely right.
Bad stuff.
That's right.
With child prostitution. It was awful.
He even tried to run for, I think, higher office as well.
Yeah, I think he was
in
running
those
for
cases,
Senate or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
So there's enough scandal, I guess, to go around.
There sure is.
Well, we're talking about the fiscal part of this.
So,
question, but then I also want to talk a little bit about the upcoming Republican convention and some of these races, and I'm hoping that the senator will announce she's running for governor.
Marty, we're connecting. We're on the same page on this.
That's
exactly
I think right now would be a good time.
By the way, just for the record,
yes,
we did vote in Sunday sales. And I did support
it. Oh, yeah, what was the
it.
story on that?
Yeah, well, what happened was over the years, because we've had this restriction on Sunday sales of alcohol, a lot of small mom and pop companies have grown around it. During this recession, in fact, we've had a number of individuals that started, because they lost their jobs, started a liquor store, a wine store, and so forth. So we've grown a number of businesses. So they're small mom and pop shops. For them, the Sunday sales idea would hurt them because they work as sole proprietors. They work 6 days a week, 7 days. They would never have any time off with their families. And to hire someone would really cut into their margins. So for many years, they were successful, and I supported small businesses. However, this year, we worked together. And I talked with them, and they accepted Sunday sales if they could also be allowed to at least make some level of profits.
So you want Sunday liquor sales. You want Sunday hunting. I don't know. I got a bad feeling about this. Caller, you have a question for the senator?
Yeah, Senator Boucher, I want to touch on education for just a quick moment. The education reform was a major topic up there at the Capitol. I think it's one of the most contested, hotly debated topics of the Capitol this session. Mm-hmm. And under Governor Malloy's plan, he's given $3.3 million more dollars to charter schools. And although, there's only 3,000 students that are being taught in charter schools, it works out to be about $1,100 per student. Meanwhile, the entire city of Bridgeport that has 21,000 students are getting $3.3 million, or $156 per student. New Haven that has 17,000 students will getting another $2.3 million, but that works out to be $130 more per student. Now, this the education reform thing that you were voting in favor of, why is it that charter schools are getting so much more money, although they have a lot less students, versus schools such as like Danbury or other municipalities within your district that are saying, hey, look, the ECS formula is not fair for us, and these charter schools are getting so much more money per student, meanwhile places like Danbury have to have classrooms and closets and teachers scrambling to buy supplies for their students. Thank you very much.
Well, the caller brings up a very, very good point. Excellent point, in fact. And I think that this particular education reform package was renegotiated several times, and it ended up being a compromise bill, not the original intended bill that the governor wanted, which was much more generous to charter schools. That was scaled back considerably. And it is a good point that he's made. I think there was a lot of discussions with teachers from each of the towns to talk about certain things that didn't involve money. Things like evaluation systems that could be tied to tenure, changes in the dismissal process, which was all renegotiated to the point where it was much more agreeable. In fact, it passed unanimously out of the House, unanimously. Every single legislator, Republican and Democrat, voted for it in the House, and only 7 voted against it in the Senate at the end of the day because he did pull back. The charter schools were limited to a substantially few, only 5 being allowed in the next 3 to 5 years, and in fact only 2 in the first, and they had to be geared towards only the failing school system. So there were very few that are being promoted, and in fact, the original intent was to provide $11,000 in funding for them. They get $94,000 right now, but this bill took them from $94,000 to $10,500.
But what I think the caller is saying is that a lot more resources are being targeted towards these overachieving charter schools, and the rank and file schools are limited, according to his perspective.
No, not necessarily. I think that that's not the case. I think what has really happened is that funds are being directed at the 25 most failing schools, not systems or cities, but individual schools. And only a few will be tackled in the first couple of years. So not all 25 are going to be targeted with additional financial support. Who is getting more financial support is the cities, the most distressed cities, and they're getting a larger allotment. Places like Danbury and Stanford and Norwalk that do have children living in poverty but have high property values tend to be short-sheeted in this ECS formula, which that is where the problem really is. And we've tried to propose changes in that without much success, because the inner cities that we're talking about fight vigorously to keep that. They received a great deal more. In fact, Bridgeport got over $3 million more generally for their school system.
Have you seen the documentary Waiting for Superman?
Yes,
Very good. If you haven't seen it, go see Waiting for Superman. It opens your eyes to the whole education funding and what's going on and how the students are getting the short
I must
trip.
tell you, a lot of the funding also is going for more preschool slots. The governor wanted 500 more preschool slots for disadvantaged children. There's 1,000 in this particular proposal. There's also very strong proposals on early reading success, trying to get most of our kids reading by the 3rd grade, which is desperately needed, and English acquisition. And some of that charter funding will go to new systems that will concentrate on English language learners and their ability to really read and comprehend. So, as I said, I think that...
State Senator, you're making my hair hurt. You're going on and on about this education. Just kidding. Okay, caller, you have a question.
Yes, Marty, I'm a fan of yours, and I'm a fan of John Fry. I live in Ridgefield. And,
Good. Is that town where they cut taxes by 1% and houses are for sale, and it has an award-winning education program, highest in the state for 4 years?
Best town to live in, right?
Did you see the turnout, Marty?
Yeah.
12% of the town voted. That's pathetic. Okay.
Well, and it was 3-1 in favor. That's what
That's
we call.
because Marty wasn't running the cycle.
My question, I'll make it very simple. I'm in Ridgefield. I'm a retired teacher. I want to know. I just heard what the senator said about, with all due respect, about charter schools. Charter schools, if you go to Bridgeport, it's a disaster. It's a crime. However, Bridgeport's the reason Democrats carry Fairfield County. And my question I've got a million questions for her, but I'll ask just one question. Can you give me 2 or 3 reasons why Linda McMahon is a suitable candidate for senator?
Okay. Thank you very much for the call. Let me just break down what he said. He's a retired teacher. Doesn't seem to be in favor of charter schools.
Right.
I think you're getting a little backlash on the whole charter school.
Sure.
Seems like a pretty good system to me.
Well, there's some that are successful and some that are not.
Okay.
They are made to be laboratories and testing new ideas and new processes and timing and curriculum and hours of the day. That's what they're meant to be. Some of them succeed very well. Amistad is nationally renowned. However, there are many that don't succeed, and as a result, they don't get their charters renewed.
Amistad, was that ship that there was a slave revolt on?
That's right. They modeled it.
Right out of the
You're amazing,
that's
huh?
very good. Very good. But now the question involves politics, huh?
We segued into politics, which is exactly what I want to do. Thank you for the call. What about Linda McMahon? Because we got Linda McMahon, we got Chris Shays. This is the Senate campaign.
Well, let me give you
he wanted
an
3
observation.
things why. I can give you 3 things to vote for Linda McMahon, but you go ahead.
Well, there are 3 things to vote for Christopher Shays, and there are 3 things to vote for Linda McMahon, and there's negatives as well.
Someone get a fence and put it right here, because that's where our guest today is lying, right on the fence.
Let me
tell you.
Okay. As a state, wait a minute. You have to give me some credibility here, because I was a state rep for 12 years. And when I was a state rep, before I became a state senator, I had a congressman that was our congressman for the 4th District. And every time I had a problem with a constituent that needed immigration issues, when we had serious problems, I would have to go to our congressional or our senator's seat. The two places I would go is Christopher Shea's office, because they always responded and they took care of our people, and Senator Lieberman on the Democratic side had an excellent constituent office. So these individuals helped my constituents, and as a result, I respect that. Secondarily, he's a gentleman that knows something about international events, and he's also someone that has been a budget hawk. Now, there are negatives. He has negatives that I did not agree with him on many important votes. And
cap and trade.
yes, a number of things that I absolutely disagree with. Now, on Linda McMahon's side, she is a strong and successful businesswoman. She's personally very likable and seems to be a straight shooter, which I admire and respect. Now, she knows how to create a business. She has both created a business, self-destructed and lost a business, and then recreated it again. So understanding the vagaries of the business sector, in my view, is extremely important, given that our economy is the #1 issue that we have to deal with. On the other hand, she does not have the experience of having been through the halls of Congress and understands how the system works, and having established the relationship that often can help people in your district. But I think personally, she is a woman to be respected and extremely likable as well. So I see pluses on both of their individuals. I would like to see either one of them win this seat, because I think we need balance. And we need a Republican in that seat. It would be nice to have a Senator Blumenthal and a Republican senator, so that we have both sides of the aisle covered for us in D.C.
So she was on our show 2 weeks ago, and we had several callers call in, and they said, why would anybody spend $50 million to get elected to a job that only pays $250 grand a year, or whatever it is? What do you think her motivation is?
That's a good question.
Save it.
I don't think she needs the notoriety, and obviously she doesn't need the money. And she seems to be wanting to give something back and maybe put some of her experience in the business sector to work for us. That's a very good question.
Okay,
you can ask that of anyone.
For the caller, talking about Linda McMahon and WWE, he claims that it was primarily her husband that put that together. And what else did you say, caller?
The party line has been that she knows how to create small jobs for the small business owner, or jobs in the small business sector. WWE is Vince McMahon's baby. She's the wife. She's going to probably spend $100 million in the last 2 years between the gubernatorial and the senatorial race. What does she bring to the table? I hear platitudes. She creates more jobs, which means what? They have new wrestlers. They have women wrestlers. What has she done? She's a likable person. I've met her. But what does she bring to the table?
Well, the spandex industry alone has flourished under Linda McMahon's leadership. I think we can agree on that.
That and silicone.
And I think that's true. No, I mean, I'd just check you on that just a little bit, because I think very much Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon, they met when she was like 13 and he was 14 or something. We're talking about the South here, right? Does this go to the South?
No,
no.
I think 17 is more the word for
South
it.
about as granted, that's about it.
I understand.
But the point is, I would check you on that. I think she was really part of the early struggling of that entertainment enterprise. So she's not, a trophy wife he came to later in life. They've been married 40 years, and she was there.
45.
She tells a story about how she was pregnant
45.
and going to the bankruptcy court, and her car broke down, so she ended up going to the bankruptcy court pregnant, getting a ride from the tow truck owner. So I think she's earned her stripes as far as building a business. But you have a response?
What jobs has she created for Connecticut, Marty?
You ever been to Hulk Hogan's house in Stamford? It's a nice house. Go ahead.
The only thing I mentioned to the caller is, I don't know, I'm not a fan of watching WWF or WWE. That's not how I spend my time.
I understand these things
but
are
it
rigged.
does come on from time to time. And Linda McMahon has been out there in the ring, doing the theater, doing the show, playing out the theme of the show night after night. She's been seriously involved with it. Now, Now, I know the person that called in a few callers ago was our esteemed colleague Al Robinson, who is probably knows more about Connecticut politics than anybody else in the private sector in Connecticut.
Toni knows
private
more.
sector, that's why I qualified it. And the thing he always likes to bring up is, well, look at how she made her money. I mean, it's the center of steroids and sexism and everything bad. How do you respond to that?
Well, I have to tell you that I am like everyone else that's out there right now. I am not a spokeswoman for either one of these candidates at all.
That's fair.
And I am also trying to assess their positive and negative qualities, just like everyone else. And not knowing, I've known one candidate's offices and their work much longer over a period of many years, so I can speak probably a little bit more with knowledge in that regard. I've only just started to get to know the other candidate, just like you. I understand that the marketing genius is certainly on her husband's front. The back office and business side is probably where Linda McMahon has spent more of her time. And so, hiring people, vetting people, paying bills, receivables, and so on. So that back office work is really the guts of the small business person or even the large business person, and budgets. Managing a budget or not managing it well.
You haven't lived until you've had to meet a payroll.
Oh, let me tell you, absolutely. I know that very well. I know what it's like to have a small business and not take my own pay for 6 months so that your employees can get paid and they can support their family, and worrying about it when you're going to the grocery store and having your house up as collateral, so putting everything at risk. So that's what makes me very concerned when people demonize the job creators. And as a result, pit them against the job seekers, because you need the job creators so the job seekers have a place to be employed. I understand the offices that WWE has in Stamford that I drive by occasionally houses a lot of employees. I don't know the business. I only just met Linda McMahon myself for the first time just a short while ago as well, and learning about the individuals through the public sphere as well. And so it's going to be difficult for me. I am a superdelegate at tomorrow's convention. So I'm going to have to cast a vote at that point. I'm tending to lean right now to Christopher Shea's race. However, I do respect Linda, and if at the end of the day she becomes our candidate, I'm going to support her candidacy, as well as I'm going to be working hard for re-election myself.
So not that my opinion on politics would be particularly relevant,
Go ahead.
but a plug for Chris Shea is his wife. His wife is simply charming. Is just works a crowd better than anybody.
Oh, yes.
The negative on Chris Shea to me is that he's been a career politician.
Sure.
But so maybe a fresh face would be okay. But to be honest, if Chris or Linda won, it would be fine with me either way.
Lightning round. Some thoughts on Linda McMahon. Go right ahead, caller. Quick.
Real quick, in all due respect, with this CEO of the WWE, Linda McMahon, during the 1990s, promoted male misogyny, degrading of women on TV. It was a very terrible period in which it was a very shameful program that was done between the hours of 8 and 10 o'clock on Monday when kids were watching that stuff. It was very horrible. I'm sure Senator Boucher knows about that because I was in her area. But we're talking about...
Quick. We got 30 seconds.
I want to hear something about Brian Cahill, who's the other candidate in that Senate race. I want to find
Brian
out.
Cahill. I love it. I'm so glad he brought him up.
Thanks.
Brian Cahill is absolutely, he's outstanding. Sharp guy. Oh my gosh, I have so respect him and have enjoyed getting to meet him. I wish that he had a higher presence and visibility and name recognition. I'd like to see him run for something that he can actually win convincingly, because honestly, he's one of those bright stars and a new talent that I think could go a long way in the Republican Party. I would support him in a race that he could win, and I'm looking forward to him in Republican politics for a long time to come.
10 seconds. Why should people vote for you, and how can they get in touch with you?
Well, if they like what I've done, and I'm known for getting things done and having a strong voice for my constituents and bringing their positions front and center and being able to work with the other side on education, equality, and as well as being strong on budgets, then I'm the person for that.
Toni Boucher, Google her. The R is silent. And you can get in touch with her campaign, and we're so glad you came in. We really appreciate it. I know it's been a long day. Thank you very much. Next week, we got the Boys and Girls Clubbing. After that, we got some guys that Frank knows about. And after that, Chris Murphy. Yes, that Chris Murphy. You didn't think we had Democrats. We're in consultations. He's going to be coming in soon. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on the Marty Heiser Show. Thank you.